lot of miniature wargamers have this thing. It's called the pile of shame. I don't know if model makers have it, but it's a closet or area of
I have an area of outstanding projects.
Outstanding project. So
and I don't mean like fantastic. What's up, plastic addicts? Welcome back to the Sci-Fi Model Podcast, presented by Jason's Model Shop, the fastest growing sci-fi modeling podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Jason C. Marshall, and if this is your first time here, the Sci-Fi Model Podcast is your source for everything sci-fi model making, including pop culture subjects, movies and TV, and a little bit of miniature wargaming. In the last episode, I spoke with my good friend Ken Bowman, and we talked a lot about wargaming minis, sci-fi models, and despite what some gatekeepers may say, fundamentally, yes, they fit the mold, as it were. But we had a fairly long conversation. We kind of just, as friends, we just chatted a bit, and we ended up talking about a couple other things, primarily imposter syndrome. We touched on the topic of motivation, as I had discussed before, because it is a thing that exists that no one's really talking about. And then we got into 3D printing, which I'm wading into. Ken has more experience. Obviously, other people we know have much, much more experience. But having said all that, what do you say we get into it?
Yes, I do suffer from imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I totally do. And I think it just, it's things that happen to you when you're a kid, right? But I'm confident enough in my painting that if somebody pushed me hard enough, I would paint something for them. Mm-hmm. But at the same point in time, it's not something I want to do on a regular basis, because
the deal has to be right.
Yeah. And I mean, even though I didn't want to paint these ones for my friend, he really wanted to get in the game, and he's just like, no, I really want you to do this, and yada, yada, yada. He eventually bent it, because he's like, okay, this is the color scheme I want. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, that's actually relatively easy for me to produce. So I did it. And I did it in a really quick amount of time, because it was very surprisingly easy to do.
Right.
It was a very simplistic color scheme that he wanted, and I just did them up. Mechs don't take that long to paint. Like a mech would probably take me 2 hours to do in high detail. And like, especially if you keep the paint scheme fairly simplistic. I'm not super good at freehand right now. That's one of those skill sets that I want to work on. But, I do what I can.
There is, it's two things. I suffer from imposter syndrome for a long time, until, I'm not going to say who or whom, because it was multiple people, but, watching various, let's say, political commentators from both spectrums, mostly from the right, just saying stuff that is, not true. But they're just saying it, and people are eating it up. I'm like, well, shit, I only deal in facts. Why am I holding myself back if I don't think that I'm good enough, or people would, and it was just kind of this aha moment, like, well, shit. And yeah, there's always going to be someone better than you. And I've got another friend who makes some great models, but he really, imposter syndrome really hits him, so he won't do anything for anyone else. I'm like, dude, I could get you a ton of work, because USA clients, I'm like, I can't do them, I'll send them to you, but yeah, he won't.
Well, what about here's like, Jason, what about a collab? Like, would he be more willing to do it if you collaborated with him and he helped you facilitate the sale in the States, but you provided some, sort of pizzazz that made him believe, like you do something incredibly small, right? And he does most of the work, and I'm not trying to trick him into doing it, but to kind of encourage him, like.
No, I don't think he'll go for it, but also because there's a whole thing. The second to last episode before this one was about motivation and lack of it, and what to do. And he said he's also been suffering from a lack of motivation. Now I get that, because you work hard all day, you get home, and you kind of got nothing left. I mean, that's what our society does. It chews you up.
So here's my trick for motivation. So and I'm bad for this. right? I'll go through stints where I put 30 minutes a day into my minis, right? Summer's a busy time for me, so I haven't been painting at all. And Starfield just got released, so
so you're a little occupied.
Been a little sidetracked, but eventually I'm going to be finishing off these Calmstar units. I'm in no rush for these guys to be done. And to be honest with you, if I have no interest in painting these guys, I'm going to go pick up something. Like, for instance, this guy. He was a one-off. I don't even collect this army. I just did him because I wanted to.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because... It was because I was sick of painting 1,000 of these.
Yeah, you need to change.
And these guys are super easy to paint. These guys are the most simple paint design. These are the easiest army to paint in the entire game. And the tank is probably one of the hardest ones because all the detail. Here's the thing: if you want to keep motivation and modeling is your thing, try skipping to a different genre for a model and then going back to it. You never know. I absolutely love World War II planes. I just don't want to go to the store and buy specific color paints because I have to paint the interior of the color the same color that they painted all aircraft in World War II.
Yeah.
Right? Would I love to build my P-51? Yeah, and one day I will. I'm just not interested in doing it right now.
But
if I were to go grab mini soldiers or whatever from the French Revolution, the French Revolution or anything like that, or English, British colonial redcoats, right, and paint them up just honestly for shits and giggles. Then it keeps me painting and it keeps me on top of my game, right? Like if you are a modeler and that's what you love to do and you have no interest in doing it, it's okay to take a break. Just what is it? There's a very, very well-known miniature war gaming icon that I watch all the time, and his name is sorry, just give me a second. Edit this.
Oh, yeah.
He just released a video. I'm not going to say who because
because you can't remember.
Because I can't remember. But I just watched his video, and I watch his videos all the time. And so what he says is, if you have burnout because of miniature war, like if you have paint burnout and you need to take a break, it's okay. Just set a date in which you're going to come back.
Yeah.
Right. And one of his solutions could be, if he's sick and tired of painting the same stuff over and over again, right? Maybe he could try picking up a different model kit that might interest him. Like, everybody has multiple interests. You can't just be interested in Star Trek models. You have to, you have other interests. We were just talking about model railroading. You know what? Pick up a fucking locomotive and just real and make it look real. Right? And just buy a track and stick it on a wooden plaque. Look, I did this. Holy shit. And if that keeps you inspired to do the work.
You can do a static shelf model of a railroad. It doesn't have to be operational. When I did the last episode on motivation, I didn't focus so much on burnout, but I get what you're saying, and I always have multiples on the go so I can switch off. I tend to focus more on the motivation itself, because there's a misconception that motivation leads action, and that is sometimes true, but you got to remember that action leads to motivation.
Yep.
Just start something, and once you get settled and kind of doing it, then the rest will flow naturally. And if it doesn't, then you take a break.
One thing that inspires me is, like, I'm working on a table for BattleTech. So my goal every paycheck is to buy one terrain set every paycheck, because they're 20 euros, right? The guys from Europe, right? So it works out to be like $50 a terrain set. But I mean, these are massive chunks of terrain. Like, I bought an aerospace, what is it? An aerospace airport, right? A spaceport for $50 Canadian, right?
Yeah.
You can't buy that if you were buying the physical model, right? And then I just 3D printed on my Ender 3. Okay, it's got the lines in it, but I'm going to paint it, and it's just terrain. It's not doesn't need to look spectacular. What needs to look spectacular is the miniatures on the table, right? It's just there to be a place marker. So, there's those kind of inspirations, right? And what's going to be really daunting is when I have to paint it all, because it's going to be like, oh my God. Yep. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, I need a quick way to paint all this. Yeah. Right? Or it's just going to be black plastic sitting on my table, right? Or primed plastic sitting on my table, right? So that's another way that I could lead to burnout. A lot of miniature war gamers have this thing. It's called the pile of shame. I don't know if model makers have it, but it's a closet or area of
I have an area of outstanding projects.
Outstanding project. So
I don't mean like fantastic.
So I've actually been pretty good to myself. So I have the box set of Blood Bowl, an entire Tau army, like 16 lances of mechs, an entire box set for Black Seas, and maybe about 20 models or so for Warhammer 40k that I need to do. So my pile of shame is actually fairly small.
I'm going to tell you what my pile of shame it is. And I got to say this, I got to qualify this first. My customer, Florida Man, has been exceedingly cool because I am not just behind on his 350 refit. I am months behind on 350. One, because I had to restart it.
Is that the one that you are 3D printing parts for?
Yeah. So that was the other benefit, though. As it turns out that waiting, like taking this break, allowed me to find things that didn't exist for me when I started the build. So there's a bunch of 3D printed parts and accessories I can add moving forward. I can add to this to actually step it up. So there's a benefit there. But this is a challenging model, and I need constant breaks to step away from it.
Okay.
Because there's so many steps involved and there's so much complex lighting in it. So he's been super cool about my dawdling pace.
No,
but it comes back to what, like you said, you gotta if you're not feeling it, sometimes you gotta step away from it, because there are times if you force it, it's just gonna not be good.
Yeah, if he's probably the type of client that would rather you do a good job than rush through it. Yeah. You pay for time and money or what it takes to produce good quality products. Right.
Yeah. And here's the thing: he's kind of rather than one payment, he's doing it in payments. So I haven't asked him for any money for until I get to further down the line. I'm not like hold on to your money until I get this near completed.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But that's more of okay. So I had a project for film. It was a paintball documentary. I shot the entire thing myself. That took me a while to finish because it was a daunting task. I had 5 tournaments in which I followed I followed a team around for 4 days in their entirety, from the time we woke up to sleep. So I had not hours, tens of hours to watch through and pick out shots and get those moments and stuff like that. Luckily, I have a good memory, so I remembered, a lot of the key moments and stuff like that, and I got a lot of it done. And I got paid for the project, but it was daunting. It was a hell of a task. Some of the films that I've edited, they were all very daunting, and they all took the time. But when I was done the project, I was super, super happy with what I did. And it's funny because one thing I never had that imposter complex on was my video production or my video editing, because I was fairly confident in my skills, right? Then, then with my miniature painting, it's not because I doubt my skills, it's because I just don't want to, like I don't want to have to. I would like to do a few, but I would rather do a piece and then sell that piece as a final piece.
Yeah.
Than have somebody be like, I bought this model.
Build
the model to your specifications, how you like it, and then sell it on eBay or sell it to a friend or whatever. Like that's that to me is a lot more appealing.
Yeah, I don't know a number of modelers who do that. They just build and post.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty dope.
I want to talk about one more thing. We won't get too deep in it because it's such a big subject before we kind of wrap up. So 3D printing. 3D printing. I've been posting my stuff. It's been about 3-4 weeks since I've been set up, and kind of bit of a steep learning curve and figuring out things like you said, supports, which is a bit.
Hey, you've been learning the easier form of 3D printing.
Yeah, the SLA versus the extrusion, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's something I was always interested in, but I said to you, waiting until the cost came down. That was a big one. The quality was good enough. But then what was holding me back was like, what the hell do I buy? What equipment do I buy? And it was when you were like, hey, check out my setup, that it kind of crystallized, like, okay, now I understand the different types and the different steps.
All right, I'm going to take you on a long journey, my friends.
All right, everyone, buckle in.
So, because of Warhammer and the fact that that armature that I showed you is one of my favorite models. I love the Imperial Knights. Honestly, if I could have a full Imperial Knight army, in fact, one day I will have a full Imperial Knight army. When I get bored of BattleTech, I guarantee you, if I have a little extra cash, I'm probably going to buy a Knight and just build that army, because I just love giant fucking robots. Even if they're gothic. Even if they're gothic robots, I just fucking love giant robots. Giant stompy things with big guns. Yes! Right?
Yeah.
But there's so much, like, with the kit you get, there's only so much you can do. Like, you can magnetize it so you can move the arms. You can buy kits so that, like if you buy the biggest Games Workshop kit for $40K, you can get all of the guns available to all of the units. There's different heads you can use, right? You can magnetize all them, so you can swap them out. You can diversify a unit. But if you want to make a custom Night House, actually, there was one. I'm going to plug Anvil of War. There's my favorite video that we absolutely did, and here's how we came about it. I saw this guy's Knight, all right, at a Warhammer 40K tournament, and I'm just like, my words to the judge at the painting competition was, "Holy fuck, who did this Knight?" And he's like, "Oh, that's this guy." So I went over and I talked to him. I said, "Look, man, I really love your army. I love the way it's painted. I love the way it looks. I think it's so unique. We need to have you on our channel." Right? And we did, because we had a series called Army Showcase, in which we showcased our own armies, but this was the one time that I was able to pull somebody else in from the community and be like, "Yo, I need you to come in and talk about your army." And he brought it in. It was this Celtic style, wood elf style Imperial Knight collection, and oh my god, it was awesome. Right? So it got me thinking, like, how much customizability is there to these kits, right? Because one of the beautiful thing about mini wargaming, especially Warhammer and stuff like that, is the universe is so big, right? You can literally have anything. You can have worlds where, your Night House is stuck in the 16th century, right? So everybody else is sword, shield, and bow and arrow, right? Like, you've got these giant ancient robots that can barely be maintained, right? That settle battles for them, right? Or defend the planet, with these guns that haven't been able to being maintained for thousands of years, right? That's how ancient these machines are. So you could literally have anything, right? For an army. Now, what are the customizable options, right? And that's where I started looking into 3D printing, because it's like, okay, I have these Necrons. There's not really a whole lot I can do with them to kit bash them. I want to make some unique and interesting characters, because this army is, 60 million years old. They've got some interesting stuff going on. So I started looking at kit bashing options, which led me to different websites and looking at options. And I was like, okay, well, I have to pay for these. That's cool. But, I need to get these 3D printed. All right, cool. So what's 3D printing all about? So I started looking into it. Plus terrain, too. Like, so there's a lot of really cool terrain that you need for Warhammer or BattleTech or whatever. It doesn't matter what war game you're playing. You need terrain, right? Because part of the, thing. Because you're not going to have like, it's not like 18th century battles. You're just going to have two armies standing in a line and, firing muskets at each other and then hoping, one side falls down first. That kind of warfare is boring as shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's entertaining to somebody if you're into historical battles, but it's you don't play war games like that. I never played paintball like that. I think that'd be stupid, right? But so you've got to have cover for these units. So trees, buildings, rubble, rocks, natural things, and you either have to model them or 3D print them, which is a lot easier to do. So I started looking into both forms of 3D printing. Now, I was exposed to FDM 3D printing, which is the filament style, 3D printing through paintball, right? So making accessories for paintball guns and airsoft guns, especially, and stuff like that. Actually, I have a paintball gun that has some 3D printed parts on it, and they are phenomenal. They make it look so sick. It's not even funny. Everybody that sees my marker on the field is like, "Holy crap, where did you get that?" And I'm like, "I 3D printed it. I 3D printed it." They're like, "Oh my god, that's sick! Can I get it? Oh my god!" Because that's how we are in this sport. So I kind of knew a little bit about FDM 3D printing, which I've been exposed to for a longer period of time. One of the computer stores I was working with had a 3D printer, and they were dabbling with it. So I was always kind of interested in it. And I understand, it's very based on CAD style directional systems, so X, Y axis and Z axis and stuff like that. It's and so I started learning about it. I was interested in it. I started learning about it, and I've been learning about it for a while. So I learned all I could about FDM style printers, and it was like, yeah, okay, those are cool, but you don't get the kind of detail you need. All right, and then there was this new stuff coming out. There's the two different acronyms for it. SLA is the laser, and then there's DLPM. Anyways, it's the DLM. It's the monochromatic screen. It's the type that you have. The plate comes down, it exposes it, rips it off the plate, and then keeps doing the process over again. So I've been looking into that for about a year, watching as many YouTube channels as I possibly could. Be like, okay, I really want to get into this because I want to be able to do miniature parts. Like I want to be able to do, I wasn't necessarily in it for like printing entire miniatures. I was more or less wanting to augment ones I already had or buy a kit and then add this part to it, right? Which people do a lot. And there's some really good artists out there that can totally blow GW out of the water when it comes to their their stuff. So you've got the two competing technologies. Both have their merits, and I was learning all about it. So I spent about a year doing it, and I've talked to a few people who are into 3D printing, and they're like, oh, well, arming myself with information, much like the conversations that you and I have had. I come across as knowledgeable because I spent a lot of time researching this before I dove in, because it's like, okay, well, I'm the only person I know with any of this equipment, so I want to know what I'm talking about. And I'm like that with anything. I was like that with film and video, or before I bought anything, I always wanted to know as much as I could about it so I could get the most out of it. I'm a novice when it comes to 3D printing. I know people who know way more about this than I do, right? And can push the same printer I have to get twice the detail out of it. I just choose not to, because there's no need for it for me. I'm not doing anything at much larger of a scale than 28 millimeter, right?
Yeah.
So, and a 4K printer gives you pretty freaking good detail. Now, a lot of the newer printers, so you can get up to a 12K printer. A lot of the newer printers, they will give you the same, if not more detail, but it'll look smoother. Right. Like if you've noticed, even on Adam Savage just did the video for Starfield, right? Like if you see the model, the for film model that they created, you can see the mold, the 3D printing lines, right, on the model. Which, so what? It's a fucking beautiful model. Right? Yes, and this guy is an amazing personality when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? He's a creator. So he's one of those people that like could do no wrong in my mind.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
so anyways, they do the Starfield first ship, the Frontier.
Yep.
But you can see the lines from 3D printing, whereas with a 12K printer, you honestly wouldn't get that. It would look smooth because you're dealing with like I think it's like 0.18 microns or something like that of level thickness, right? Like that's how far it'll go down to. So it's very, very smooth. Anyway, so I'm getting kind of sidetracked. I spent a year learning about these printers, and I finally decided to dive in because I'm like, okay, I was getting into BattleTech. I bought the first 2 box sets, and I'm like, sweet, they've got all these mechs out, but they don't have any of the tanks. One of the beautiful things about BattleTech is the other vehicles. So adding tanks, adding helicopters, having that diversity when you're in the middle of a battle, because it's all very intricately working together. Right, and they all communicate. That's the beautiful thing. On the battlefield, tanks can communicate with mechs, and it's just there's tactics that I could explain to you that you wouldn't understand unless you play the game, right? And they're based on real world military tactics, right? So, and by adding those units to the game, you're adding so much more. It's like you're opening a door in this game that you never would have had before. So I bought a 3D printer to be able to gain access to those units to play a game. And I was like, okay, sweet. I'm going to print terrain. I'm going to do this. And I mean, the printer I bought the Anycubic 4K Mono X, or 4K Mono. Photon Mono. Anyways, the name doesn't matter. It's a 3D printer. It's a 4K 3D printer. I bought some resin and I started printing with it. I'm like, wow, these are amazing, right? So I started printing them and playing with them. A lot of the differences I found, so resin printing is super easy once you get the machine set up and printing. It's fairly foolproof. Once you learn what you need to learn. You need to learn supporting your model. You need to learn supporting. You need to learn how to orient it. You know what I mean? And that was 90% of my year learning how this worked, was learning that stuff. Right. So when I got this stuff, I wasn't disappointed with, oh shit, my models aren't turning out, they're failing, right? Yeah. Because I learned a lot about
I do a lot of test prints.
Right. Whereas I didn't have to. And it was more because I took the time to learn how to do that stuff. And I understand the process of what's happening when this stuff fails, or when this this part failed here. And I still have prints that fail.
That's actually an interesting topic, because I was thinking about that because I said I jumped in. I'm more of a trial and error printer. Yeah. And I was thinking about that just the other day. I'm like, okay, so these prints failed, but I do need to go and do the research. I don't know why. I can't diagnose why they failed, because I don't know what the printer
90% of it is because, so when the printer is doing two things. The printer comes down and it creates, it leaves a thin layer of resin between it and the filament,
the screen,
the screen, and then it exposes it. So it's basically just a camera opening a shutter, and it exposes it to a picture, and then it has to peel that off. Right. So if at any point in that process, the resin peels away from the build plate, or there's any forces on that freshly semi-cured resin.
Yeah,
it's not cured yet. Right. It's still flexible. So as it's being pulled off of that sheet, right, even if it's slow, it can get warped. Right. Yep. And it's a problem. It's especially a problem with larger prints. Right. I'm not quite at the level where I can 100% diagnose everything that's wrong, but I understand where I went wrong with certain things. Like I just printed an aerospace civilian ship for terrain on my resin printer the other day, and there's one part that keeps failing, and it keeps failing because of that problem. So I have to change the orientation. I haven't printed another one because I ran out of resin. I printed two of them, and they both failed the same way. The first time I added supports to try and strengthen the bond, right? Because I'm like, okay, well, the supports must be, you know what I mean? But like, I'm there and I understand why it's failing, but at the same point in time, I'm just like, okay, so I have to print another one, wait another 3 hours. All right, cool.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm going to change the orientation, and so I'm thinking about these things while I'm doing it. I could just as easily print it on my FDM printer, but because it's a moving part, like it's a vehicle, I'm like, okay, well, you know, I will have that a little bit higher detail.
Yeah. I actually switched over. So when I started, I was just using the Anycubic software for supporting and whatnot.
Lychee is better.
But on your recommendation, I switched over to Lychee because it gives me more options for manually putting supports, searching for islands.
There's so many different softwares out there, man. I recommend Lychee because that's what I learned. I used the Anycubic software. It's great, but it's limited.
Yes.
Lychee is amazing for 3D printing with resin, and it sucks for 3D printing with filament.
Okay.
Right. So it's lacking far behind with filaments.
Really?
Because like I spent a month trying to figure out, well, my prints kept doing weird things and stuff like that with my FDM printer. So FDM is a whole different beast.
Yeah.
So FDM, I got my resin printer because I'm like, okay, well, I want to be able to print units and augments for these models, right? So, you know, I had some successes and some failures. I had weird bubbles. You know, I learned, and I did the same thing. I'm not going to lie. I do test prints, or I have prints that fail, but more often than not, I have successful prints. You know, since I updated my computer, I've been having more failed prints, but I have a feeling it's because I haven't gone through, like I haven't taken the time to really go through and reset up the printer. I'm just using Lychee's default settings.
Right.
It's my own laziness, to be honest with you. Whereas, and the reason why I haven't really bothered to do it is because like I've been doing a lot of printing on my FDM printer lately because I've been working on terrain, not units.
Yeah.
So I don't need as much detail. I just need to print a big thing.
Oh yeah, right? Sure. Yep.
So like where you would use an FDM printer would be great for if you needed to make a base or a mount for something that doesn't need to be really detailed, can afford to look a little bit, you know, you can see the layer lines or whatever. Like you can get 3D printers, you can get some newer 3D printers that are, you know, will do an amazing job, but you're still going to see those layer lines. And people tend to not really mind anymore about 3D printed layer lines. Now, you're not going to use that on your model itself, but like say you needed a structural element to hold wiring in place, or, you know, have like a battery, internal battery system set up so that you can like put it up into the base or anything. Like you can 3D print all that stuff. You can even design that thing in CAD if you want.
Yeah.
Right. And like the beauty of it is you can, like with my setup, I'm good because I can do whatever I want with what I'm doing, right? If I want to change what I'm doing, I might have to upgrade my printers, but for now I'm good. So the resin printing is a lot of materials handling, because the resin is toxic. You can't expose it to light, you know, it creates fumes and stuff like that. So like right now I have my setup. You remember my setup. I have my setup encased in a Mastercraft steel setup. Like it doesn't smell, right? And my plan this winter is to actually go to Princess Auto and do a venting system from inside to out to my window, just like my, you know, so that I don't have to worry about fumes, because I'm planning on experimenting with some resins over the winter, because I work in construction. I'm going to be on break and I'm going to have the time to do so. So I'm going to experiment with different resins. So I'm going to need to get a venting system. One of the biggest mistakes you can make in resin printing is misunderstanding the toxic stuff you're working with, right? You work in construction just like I do. You deal with shit that can kill you if you use it the same way and not properly over years, right? Resin might not affect you right away, but eventually you're going to build up some sort of an allergic reaction to it. And it's a chemical burn. It can seriously hurt you. Not to mention the sheer fact that plate going down into the resin and ripping it up is disturbing the molecules in that resin, so the air quality in the room goes down. Now, you can get those carbon filters, but they just do the smell, right? There's a few videos out there that prove that they don't really do much for the air quality in the room. So ventilation is a huge factor, right? So there's a few things that you have to think of when you're dealing with resin 3D printing versus FDM printing. FDM printing is perfectly fine if you're dealing with PLA. If you're dealing with ABS, then you need to consider getting an enclosure and venting it. So like, it's just a matter of understanding the materials you're working with and the processes that are going on. Resin printing is so much easier to deal with because you're going to get high quality prints. They will be brittle. You'll get high quality prints. You got to learn a little bit about exposing the resin, especially if you're working with clear resin. Like I have a custom flight stand set that I made out of clear resin. And this one's a little bit more opaque because what I had to do was I had to learn, okay, well, 3D printed base, 3D printed acrylic style resin. So it's a clear resin. They will yellow over time. Because every time
my experience already, they will yellow very fast.
They do, because every time you take them out, like you're working in a very window heavy environment, each time you pull that thing out of a non-UV protected area, it's exposed. So it's consistently getting more and more and more exposed to the point where eventually it's going to get so yellow, it's going to crack, and it's just going to be brittle as crap. Right? So what you have to do is you get a clear acrylic sealer or acryl enamel sealer, and you seal that, and it'll stop that process from happening. So there's all those.
For me to do, I've already learned for clear, I've got to do it. It's basically a nighttime job for me.
Yep. And then as soon as it's done, as soon as it's cured, you clear coat it. It's and since I learned that, I haven't had a problem with it, but it took me a little bit. I'm like, okay, why am I having this problem? Okay. So like 3D printing in itself is a completely different hobby. Like you're taking a hobby and then you're adding another hobby on top of it to do more things with this hobby. Right. So that covers resin printing. Why I got a filament printer is because I'm insane and wanted to put myself way more in debt. But I wanted to build terrain, right?
Well, okay, well, that's what I said. You need for your bigger piece, you need a filament for bigger pieces.
You don't need it, right? Because you can buy resin printers that will do larger pieces. Like my buddy has a resin printer; it costs him like $1,500 that has a plate that's this big. That's a pretty big piece of resin. The problem is resin is harder to print larger pieces. Right, if you don't know what you're doing, and I'm still pretty novice when it comes to 3D printing because I'm learning lots here. I'm pretty sure if I keep having parts fail that are large, I'll understand why. Like, I mean, I have one large unit that keeps failing, but it's also a huge chunk of resin, and I'm also maxing out my printer at the same point in time. So it's kind of.
I've found that mine does not like to be pushed to the limit.
No, they don't. They don't like to be pushed to the limit. And larger projects need way more support. And they need to be oriented differently. And they need to be, you need to realize that resin will warp. So before you cure it, you need to fix the warping and then cure it. Or, fix the warping and cure it while you've fixed it and stuff like that. So there's a lot. Plus, some resins will shrink and you got all kinds of stuff. So for larger stuff that doesn't need to be as detailed, stuff that's like a huge terrain piece, I'll use my FDM printer or tools. Tools are perfect. This handle here is 3D printed, right?
Exactly.
Excuse me.
Yep.
I'm not touching my model while I'm painting it now. I'm using this handle, right? These things cost like $20 a piece. I have a Games Workshop one that cost me like $15.
And how much does it cost to print it?
$2. And I have, and here I'll show you. I have a whole line of
multi-stand, and
plus I can print more if I need to. Right? I can print as many as I want.
There's a freedom. There's a freedom to it.
Oh, I've got paint, so I've got stuff to hold my paint depending on the size of paint bottle. I've got things over here to hold my paint. I do projects for buddies just to make a little extra cash on the side. Like I can, it's when something goes wrong with it, it's a lot more technical because you're dealing with mechanical parts that can fail. So the failure points on an FDM printer are a lot more than the failure points on a SLA printer or a DLM printer. Because you're dealing with 1, 2, 3 servos plus your extruder servo plus your heat element plus your nozzle plus the filament itself can have imperfections in it plus the plate has to move back and forth plus. Right, it's a mechanical process that has multiple failing points. Resin printer has less failing points, but it has a lot more chemicals and materials handling points to it, right? So like depends on what you're looking for. So I find myself lately enjoying the process of 3D printing and learning how to design things. Like right now I'm working on a case specifically for my BattleTech miniatures to transport them, a very customized case that only I will have. And if somebody wants to buy it off me, I will probably just be like, okay, cool. You can buy the you buy the 3D files off of me for $50 a piece, $50, you know what I mean? Like, so you're paying $50 for this CAD file, but you can print as much of them as you want, right? But I would only sell them specific ones to build the specific case, because the way I'm setting it up is you can customize it to build whatever you want.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, and so that's the when I will say this, the entry cost was lower than I expected. So for the Mono 2, the printer, or sorry, the dryer curer, or the
the Curie wash station,
and a container of like a 1 kilogram container of gray was like $500. Now that's not small beans. Let's be clear on that, but it's a lot lower than I expected.
So that's what, 3 model kits?
Pretty much.
Right. So what I have here, I have the same amount in 3D printing, and then I have a $300 FDM printer. Plus I have all the other stuff that goes along with it, right? But the money that I save versus going in, like wargaming terrain is just as expensive, if not more expensive, than some of the miniatures, right? Like you go and you buy a terrain set, it's going to cost you like $400 or $500 for like a small piece of, like, a table's worth of terrain on average, if you were to buy it all yourself, go to the store and buy it all yourself, is about $800.
Jesus Christ.
Depending on the level of terrain. Like if you're going to buy Games Workshop terrain and you buy those terrain kits and you build up with those terrain kits, you're looking at $600 to $800 in today's money.
Jesus.
Right? Whereas I've spent so far on BattleTech terrain, I have terrain for Warhammer. It takes a long time to print it because I don't have my FDM printer set up to print high speed, which I can easily do because I'm learning how to do that. That's the next step for me, is learning how to make my printer print in higher speeds, which I can, which will take the print time down, and I can do larger projects. Right now, for a piece like this, if I'm printing it flat on the bed, sorry, it's blurring up. A piece like this, I'm printing flat on the bed, it takes about 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right? So that's, I want to say, a centimeter thick. Right? That's a long time, especially when you're doing something that's this tall. Right? It's a few days, but that thing just hums away. I never have to touch it.
Plug it away. And so, the thing I like is that because the cost per print is low. It's at the time. Yeah, I've had a couple things and trying to get as clean as possible. It's like a 4 hour print for one thing, but you set it up and you fucking walk away.
Yep, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yep, and
Jason.
Yeah,
there's porn for that. 3D printing porn. Oh man!
Oh my god! Oh my god! People are 3D scanning their junk.
Actually, it's funny because one of the next tools that I want for my arsenal is actually
a scanner.
The one I'm looking at is a tabletop scanner, but the reason why I want the tabletop scanner is because it can do down to point 1. So it's like 0.10 microns.
Yeah.
So it's 1/10 of a millimeter.
Nice. Well, it's kind of the next step of the evolution, right? Because, because said, there are times that you might need a piece, you might have to replicate a piece, but instead of designing it from scratch to be able to scan it would be.
Yeah, you could do that, or you could take, like, say, in my world, I could take a miniature and then scan a portion of that miniature and then create like an exhaust blast that comes out of its jump jets, or
right,
some
so
gunfire.
You can also add on to it,
or I could take an arm that's on it and then just redesign that arm a little bit, or reposition that arm a little bit, because I've got that 3D scan and then I've got this custom arm piece. Yes, it's based on something that already exists, but it's going to cost me a whole lot less than chopping the plastic arm off and having to go buy another mini and then resize or readjusting it, right?
Yeah.
Which I could potentially fail at doing, right? It's just a lot easier. It's a different way to get the same thing done. So.
Nice. Well, we've been talking for about 2 hours, so maybe it's time to start wrapping it up. So
when will these guys shut up?
Well, it's more of like I want to gloss over, kind of just general overview of these various topics, because we can come back to them in the future and kind of have a more in-depth discussion. So, you, Ken Bowman, KB. So, Anvil of War. So they're not producing anymore. It's just existing content now, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, because I quit. I left Anvil of War. I was exhausted, and at the point in time, we were just kind of doing. Things got stagnant because the other business partner was his life was changing and stuff like that. And, we weren't even living in the same town, so a lot of it was remote.
Yeah, so I mean, the challenges you face as things grow and lives change and whatnot. But yeah, I've been kind of looking at it a bit here and there, so I feel like they haven't produced any new content. But everything that you've done in the past still exists. So there's 4 years of
Anvil of War.
There's a lot of content there to check out. So. So if you're in a war game,
some of it's really, really bad because certain people forgot to white balance the camera.
Shit happens.
But it's like, oh well, we have to post once a week, so we're gonna post it anyway. So
So Anvil, just at Anvil of War on YouTube, Instagram. Were you guys on anywhere else? Facebook?
I don't know. I didn't take care of the social media
stuff.
I purely focused on the technical and getting shit done.
Gotcha. Now that's your kind of your group work. Now solo, are you only doing the once a week stream of your painting? Is that all you're kind of doing as far as social now?
I don't even do that.
Okay.
I just whatever I feel like it.
All right. So you can't find Ken anywhere.
So I recently started an Instagram account. And
you did? Okay.
I don't really properly post. I'm not gonna lie. I don't really properly post. I don't like put hashtags on or anything. I'm just kind of doing it for fun, kind of dipping my feet in the water. Because bear in mind, I went like gung ho, social media fiend for years, posting weekly about Warhammer. So I'm like, I don't want to do anything that puts a lot of pressure on me, because
I get that.
Why I started resenting the whole process of miniature war painting and stuff like that was because I had to do that.
You had to. Yeah.
Right. So I have another Instagram account. It's called Riot Charged Games.
Riot Charged Games?
No, Riot Charged Games, all one word.
Okay.
And so far, it's just a picture of my dopey face and a few of the mechs that I've painted. I think there's 4 things. I do have a YouTube channel under Riot Charge Games,
okay.
But I haven't posted anything to it. because I haven't been doing any streaming. It's right now. It's got a lot of video game stuff on it.
Right.
I've been thinking about. So I retired from film, and I gave all of my equipment away. My son decided to take up my reins, so
here, I can take it.
Yeah, I don't have anything left. I'm literally relying on laptops and cell phones. So
well, I do. Like I told you, I do everything on my phone. Everything on my phone.
But I'm anal, and I'm used to, I'm used to like a camera. So long story short, I will, and I do plan on painting or recording some stuff and posting it onto that YouTube channel. But so far right now, it's just a bunch of old game stuff that I used to stream. It's been a long process, and I work a lot, and it's
that's the thing, because I'm in renovations and you're in concrete, so I can end my, like, when I'm like, no, screw it, guys, it's 3:30, I'm done. You're kind of stuck on site until.
Yeah, I don't have a choice. I work 12-hour days some days. It doesn't bother me. It's good money, but at the same point in time, I have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of energy at home, and I have a lot of things to do. I 3D print. I play miniature war games. I have elderly parents I have to take care of. I have other things that I have to take care of, right? So life is pretty busy for me, even though it's probably the quietest my life has been. It's probably the quietest my life has been in a long time, right? So it's just going to take a matter of me getting bored one day and be like, oh, I have a few extra $100. Let me go get a streaming card for my laptop, and I'll just get all this set up, and I'll just keep it set up, and then it'll just be like, hey, Ken's streaming again. You know what I mean? So I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. It's been a plan in my head for a long time. I'm one of those people sometimes that takes me a while to pull the trigger on certain decisions. Maybe this will be the inspirational topic for me.
Maybe it will. Maybe it will.
This will be the motivation I need to.
But it's that thing, like I said, because you've got so many existing models. Like I said, you could just.
Well, and that's how I took your advice.
Do a 30-second run on the turntable and just show off what you've already done.
You see, I have to get a new turntable. All that stuff is still that stuff is still property of Envelope Wars. So I have a glass one, but I don't really. I have a limited space where I'm working.
Yeah.
So for me to have a photo booth and set it up and do a spin, it's a little bit more complicated than.
I get that.
Not, but eventually it's going to happen because I can. It's not hard to acquire the materials for it, and I know how to build a photo booth. It's not really all that complicated.
Yeah,
I just have to do it right. And it's funny enough, I don't have an iPhone. I have an Android.
Oh, well, there's your problem right there.
No, there's. If I were to get into really nice photography of minis, I would probably actually get another digital SLR.
Yes, yeah.
With a very nice macro lens on it, because you have to
do the really good photos.
You do the Games Workshop quality photos. You should do that.
I need to get a good DSLR to do model making photography. Because right now I just do it with the iPhone. It comes out all right, but I mean, to have a bit more control.
You don't need a Sony you don't need a $2,000 camera to do it. You can get an older Canon or whatever. It's a matter of lighting it. Oh, and here's okay. So this is something I want to talk about too. With and you can put this wherever you want. With model making, a lot of the major differences in painting, and this is I'm taking this from somebody else's YouTube channel because it's actually an oversimplification of what I was trying to explain before. In model making, you're not painting for lighting. Yeah, you're painting
to be lit.
You're painting it to be lit. Whereas with miniature painting, you are painting the lighting onto the object.
Yep.
Right. So that is another huge difference. So I'll use layering techniques to make midtones and highlights, whereas you might not necessarily do that because you're planning on having fiber optic lighting on the inside of it, and then you're probably going to put it in some kind of encasement that lights it from the top.
Exactly.
To act like a sun.
Yeah, exactly. So I have control over my environment, as it were.
Whereas I'm putting the control. I'm telling the person, okay, well, this is where the light is coming from.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'll bump that up to the earlier section. But yeah, so
now I'm making you edit this.
There's a place people can find you, but there's no info there. That's fine. It exists.
It's a work in progress, because, like, to be honest with you, I get it. I'm rebuilding my own. After working as a team for so long, I'm rebuilding my own thing the way I would like to do it.
That's
just my own personal purposes, and it's not for any monetary gain. It's just because it's like here I am. This is what I like to do, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I switched. I've kind of gone right into the model making thing, because I don't have to depend on anyone else. I mean, except for podcasts, or talking to someone, but I don't have to depend on anyone else.
Yeah, you're doing your own thing, and it's simple. You do it when you want to, and have the time, and you can be creative and do what you need to do.
Yeah,
you're doing what you love, man, and that's the thing.
Exactly.
I lost my passion for filmmaking because of a couple of events in my life, and I was doing it so much, and I just got tired of chasing the money, and I lost my passion for it. So honestly, if I do it in a small way, it'll literally just be, for my own social media purposes and stuff like that, just to enjoy it. And so maybe somebody else can enjoy it if they want to get into it, or they're curious about it, or whatever. Even if they're just looking at pictures for inspiration, or saying, oh man, that's really cool. I wish I could do that. Or how did you do that? To be honest with you, I don't remember how I do half the shit that I do. I just do it.
That's fair. That's fair. The
shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
You can quote me on that. To be honest with you, I don't remember how I do half the shit that I do. I just do it.
I'm gonna do some editing to kind of wrap things up, and like I said, do my own thing. But that aside, like I said, this is kind of the first run.
Cut out that shot that we got earlier of me twisting my tits with tassels.
Did I actually record that? Was that when you were playing with the backgrounds?
Yeah. I was like,
looking at the screen. No, that's gonna go. That's a Patreon special.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hey, I got one patron. Oh, technically I have two, but one is Aaron. But I have a patron right now.
Nice, that's pretty dope. Guess what? I guess how many I have.
How many? Did you launch a Patreon?
No, no. And to be honest with you, I did want to. Like when I was full on doing Anvil of War and stuff, I was working on the Riot Charge Games thing, because I had plans on opening up a sister channel.
Right, yes.
Alongside Anvil of War, and doing my own stuff for like Black Seas or Bolt Action and stuff, like, because that shit interests me, right? And then then diversifying myself and eventually Anvil of War, like just to kind of create, like old school YouTube, like would have done, it's like some of the original channels. So like you start one channel, get that going, you know what I mean, get a good fan base with it, and you create another channel that can ride its back, and then hopefully build the fan bases of both, right? So that's eventually what I was going to do, but life took another direction, and now I'm sitting here going, okay, well, I'm hugely into BattleTech right now. I have a feeling it's going to be a while I'm into BattleTech, I love painting. I love the minis. I'm not a super nerd when it comes to the rules, so I don't really care about that stuff, but I love playing the game. I fudge the rules occasionally. Most of the time I'm playing at home with friends anyways, so if we don't know a rule, we just look it up, and there's no harm done, right? I play Warhammer every once in a while, right? It's all casual, right? So I'm at a point in life where if it stays casual, I'm good with it. If it becomes huge pressure, I'm just like,
well, that's,
you know what?
That's why I said, as far as the creating side of it, it has to, if it's not sustainable, it doesn't give you the time to have life outside of it, then what's the fucking point? Yep.
I mean, unless it's a business. Business is different. Or like if I was making money off of it, I would put all my time into it.
Well, so, and that's the thing. Like I said, look, I have two goals. One, I would love for this to grow into something that becomes a primary income. But my short-term goal is just to get enough patrons to pay for an editor, because I'm losing building time creating content to get people to watch the builds that I'm not making because I'm creating content.
Side note, I might know somebody, not me, who needs content to edit.
Oh yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Is it your son?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Because it's something he wants to do. He's looking at getting into freelance editing, and he needs content to edit. And one of the things that I used to make a shit ton of money off of was, and it wasn't just one podcast I did. I was doing my busiest. I was doing like 10 different podcasts for people. Right. So I would take a night a week and I would edit like 10 podcasts in one night, and I made like stupid money doing that. Nice. Because I'm like, everyone's like, well, how much do you charge an hour? I'm like, I gave them a price, and they're like, oh, that sounds reasonable. So if it took me an hour to edit, I was charging them for the hour. If it took me an hour and a half to edit, I was charging for the hour and a half. And it just adds up, right?
Yeah.
I did that for years. And it's funny because Chris and I just had that conversation the other day because he's getting pretty serious into it. And, he's like, I don't know why I never got into this when I was younger and you were actually still doing it. I'm just like, there's a reason why I gave you all my equipment. I was waiting for one of my children to be like, Dad, I'm really curious about getting into this. And I was like, all right, here you go. Sweet. I can hand off the torch. It's time for me to move on with my life to different things. Or the same thing.
Yeah, definitely keep that in mind because like I said, I'm losing build time. But then of course you had those, we had those fucking 43-degree fucking days. I'm like, okay, well, there's nothing's happening those days.
Yeah, I have a client. I have a buddy's friggin' 3D print that I have to prime today because I've been waiting for a day that's cool enough so that I can open my window and set up my airbrushing station so that I can actually prime this frickin' thing so I can begin to paint it. So as soon as we're done here, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing.
Fair enough. I'm going to hang up some laundry and then actually try to do some stuff on warp engines, but we'll see.
You know what's really cool though? You can get like colored clear resins and stuff like that, so like it could actually add to your warp engine stuff. So if you have really shitty plastic parts that aren't accurate, you know what I mean? Because I know on some of those models the clear plastic stuff can be really crap. Right, so you can actually go buy that specific color of blue or red clear resin and print that.
I've actually got speaking of that, I got a pretty good slate coming up. So I got a Otaka builder who I found him through his Star Trek builds. And he does a lot of Gundams, so he's going to come on next week. So
Gundam is huge.
Yeah, exactly. But we kind of became friends over Instagram, right? And I've reached out to a handful of people who produce aftermarket stuff for model kits.
Yep.
So those guys have big audiences. So and they're all keen to come in and talk about it because no one's doing this. No one's asking them.
Yeah.
And that's my whole thing is I'm going where everyone else isn't going, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
Well, that's the thing. Customizing your minis is a topic on its own. Models, minis, whatever it is. Like we call it in miniature wargaming, we call it kit bashing, right?
Yeah,
but it's and I think it's a pretty universal term. But if there's something that you want that isn't made by the company that you are looking at purchasing from, your option is the kit bash, right? And 3D printing is an amazing way to augment your kit bashing arsenal because you can, if you can't find a way to produce it, you can just 3D print a way to produce it, or you can augment your kit bash with 3D printed parts so that it works a lot better than having to spend hours with green stuff and epoxy resins and stuff like that to
Well, so I'm hoping to have you back. Hopefully more than once. Like every now and again, just come back and we'll talk about we'll narrow it down to one subject moving forward and just fucking chat about that. And because I don't have a co-host, I'd like to kind of have people who just kind of come in and out regularly.
Yeah, man. No worries. It's all
cool.
Good. Chill.
So, Ken, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Take good care of yourself. But yeah, seriously, thanks for making the time. And
always good to nerd out.
Yeah, exactly. And we will catch you another time.
the other side of the star field. Quite literally, because that's about what I'm going to do.
That's what you're going to play?
All right, man.
Well, all right, so that one was a little more loosey-goosey at the end. We just kind of started chatting about things. But, I mean, there's a couple good pieces of content in there. Maybe. I guess you'll be the judge of that. As for the things we talk about, what have been your experiences with any of the things we touched on, whether it be imposter syndrome, motivation, 3D printing, which, is kind of particular interest because it's a little bit more of a kind of hands-on versus the other, which are more internal, introspective. Whatever your feelings on those or anything, you can reach me at Jason's Model Shop on pretty much all the socials. For further reading, whatnot, you can find links to anything specifically mentioned in the show notes video description. If the show isn't enough to kind of feed your plastic addiction, you can find me where I post daily-ish sci-fi model making content on, once again, most socials at Jason's Model Shop, but I am most active on Instagram and TikTok. If you'd like to support the show, and by extension, Jason's Model Shop as a whole, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Sci-Fi Model Podcast. As always, thank you for spending your time, consuming this content. I really do appreciate it. And remember to feed your plastic addiction and keep on building.